We are live. Another day, another exit liquidity. This is episode, I'm going to guess 54? 50, okay, I was close.
52.
Episode 52.
52.
That's like a full year, I guess. And today we have on Dougie from Figment Capital and a bunch of other fun stuff on chain. Dougie, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Been watching for a bit. I'm glad second or first, second episode of the new year, I think, since you're 1 year. I think Smokey may have gotten the honor to do the first one, but yeah, pleasure to be here, guys. Excited
For
to
sure,
chat.
man. Happy to have you on. It's not often that we get the chance to have on an old friend because we've been connected for what, like a year and a half by now. Back when I was still in the VC game, and then there was the whole
Yeah.
what was it, Reading Rainbow? That one of
Yeah,
my
that somewhat failed attempt at trying to get like people reading. It was great though. I mean, the group chat was awesome, and it was a hard market to get attention for people to read about stuff in crypto because prices were not going up like they are now. So it's a bit of a different context.
definitely. And by now, nobody wants to spend time reading because by the time you slog through an 800 word paper, your bags have gone down or gone up. So what's the point?
That's what ChatGPT is
Right.
for.
Yeah.
You just plug it in there, gives you everything you need to know in 3 seconds, then you're off and running. It's a beautiful
Yeah,
tool.
for sure. Um, Dougie, we start out all of our episodes by first off hearing a little bit about your background and what brought you here today. But more importantly, we like to hear everyone's favorite exit liquidity story of your favorite moments in your time in crypto of being exit liquidity.
Okay. I'm gonna start with my background, and then I'll go into. I have many of those moments, so hopefully I'll think of the exact one as I go. Yeah. So for me, I've been in this space 4 or 5 years now. It's actually like research that really got me into crypto. I was studying finance and economics in college, and I was taking a class on developing country economics, and it just like kind of brought me to crypto on a few different points where like currency risk can kind of be evaded for different like basically people in developing countries, as well as the access to like financial infrastructure, which a lot of people lack in many countries. So that was good timing because shortly after that was like the bottom in March 2020. I happened to get lucky and buy some Bitcoin. And then when the prices started going up, naturally, I just like wanted to learn more. So I got really into Ethereum, Bitcoin, and actually shortly after Cosmos. And so that was in 2020. I bought Atom, just started like learning all that I could because Cosmos was very different at that time than any other ecosystem. It still is. And yeah, it's kind of like meeting people there. Building my network got me to Figment Capital in early 2022. And so it's where I've been since. I do early stage blockchain investing, lots in Cosmos, outside of Cosmos, you name it. Try to cover pretty much everything. I'm someone who tries to be unbiased in how I view crypto. I think it's a space of maximalism. I try to not be a maxi. I am in definitely some ways. I'm not ignorant of that. But yeah, so it's been an awesome, almost 2 years now. It's cool to be working in crypto now in a bull market, or what seems to be a bull market. My entire time before had basically just been bear market. I joined like a month before Terra crash. So that gives you a gist of like my kind of welcoming into the space, but we've come a long way. And so, yeah, I mean, what brings me here, Ali, just meeting you via that fateful LinkedIn DM I sent like 2 years ago. So it's been great keeping in touch since. I've been mostly in New York. You've been traveling the world. It's been cool seeing the world kind of like through the lens of like camera calls with you. And yeah, this is my best example of me being ace liquidity. So this was in November, actually. I was trading meme coins on Solana. There was a token called Doug that dropped, and I thought I had alpha, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna buy this. This is gonna go up because obviously my name is Doug, and like I have conviction in myself." I literally bought in, and right as I placed my buy, you could see just a massive red candle form where I was literally the exit liquidity. And I think today I am still probably the only holder of Doug token. Um, I couldn't sell.
Yeah.
So why sell when there's literally no market to sell? So I remain a Doug holder. Luckily, it was just a small bag, so it's not a big loss by any means. But it's worth the meme. I literally tweeted like this is mass adoption, posted the token, and before I could even do that, it was already gone. So happens to the best of us. Got to chase the meme sometimes.
I think that's definitely one of the most understandable exit liquidity stories we've had. Like it's you had to do it, right? It was your name.
Exactly.
There's a token out there called artificial liquid intelligence. The ticker is ULI. My friend Matt,
Yep.
every time he sees a transaction on CLO, he always sends it to me. He's like some big transaction. He's like, "Why didn't you like where was my insider information, dude? What the hell?" They just have a special place in your heart. They have to. Um,
They have to. Yeah.
I'm curious about so you work at Figment or you've been there for a while. In my view, Figment is like definitely a bit of a different fund or like has a different thesis from most other ones, especially given that I don't know whether Figment Capital came first or whether Figment the like infrastructure provider came first. Can you like tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that? Like kind of clear there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Figment came first. So Figment launched in, I believe, 2019, like very, very early POS days. So I think the first network that Figment supported was actually the Cosmos Hub, in its like testnet launch, which again was now a while back. And so the way that Figment Capital came to be, I'll keep this like somewhat short, but basically, validators oftentimes get opportunities to invest in the networks that they support. It's basically a way to like give them skin in the game, and Figment being a pretty big validator starting in like 2020, 2021 was getting a lot of these opportunities. And so instead of like going the corporate VC model where you just invest off your balance sheet and like are kind of limited to the size of like your balance sheet, Figment had the unique idea to start like an externally funded VC fund, which is now called Figment Capital. And so we share a name, and we like work very closely together. But we're unique in the sense that we have this great relationship, but we don't invest strategically for Figment. So we invest in the stuff that our team deems as like a compelling investment opportunity, not necessarily something that's a good opportunity for the validator. And so we're different from a lot of like CVCs that exist because they invest strategically first, and like returns are kind of a secondary thing for them. And so yeah, our fund has been kicking around since 2021. I joined about a year after its launch, and that's really the story. We've come a long way. When I joined, we were a very small fund. We have grown a bit since, and it's been cool, kind of like being here for that growth
Mm.
story.
Yeah, for sure. And is the obviously you talk a lot about Cosmos. You've got a bad kid PFP. Is that is there a lot of overlap with that at Figment? Do you guys do a lot of stuff in the Cosmos space, or is that more of a personal interest?
Yeah, so for me, Cosmos is personal and both professional. Like for me, Cosmos is really where I first like dug into crypto and like really started to meet people. Again, it was like I have a lot of thanks to owe to Cosmos for kind of like getting me deeply involved in this space. Like a lot of people in Cosmos, when I didn't know anything about crypto, quite frankly, like gave me the time of day to like explain things to me, kind of coach me in certain regards, give me opportunities that maybe I wasn't quite ready for at that time, and ultimately like got me to where I am today. Like I actually kind of was able to get to this position because I was writing Twitter threads and a bunch of different Cosmos chains back in like 2021, and just caught the right eyes, I guess, got kind of lucky. And that led me to basically get to where I am. And it's also professional because our fund is definitely one of the, I'd say, bigger Cosmos investors. We don't do Cosmos only by any means, but it's a big part of our portfolio. I think we support, I don't know the exact number, but quite a few Cosmos chains and Cosmos teams. We've just been believers in the app chain thesis for quite a long time. And I think for us, like we want to support the best teams building app chains. We think it just makes sense for a number of reasons. And then that also led us to, I think, being an early investor in Celestia as well. And so we obviously support like the app rollup thesis and the rollup thesis as a whole, and the modular thesis, all that good stuff. I personally view Celestia as a part of Cosmos. Maybe I'm like an old head for believing that. I don't think it's a common belief, but yeah, again, like it's been awesome, supporting Cosmos personally, but also as a member of my fund for a couple of years now.
You're muted, Ellie.
Thanks for that. Sorry.
All good, man.
Yeah, being early in Celestia is definitely no small achievement, especially now given everything that at least like from a social perspective, everything that people are talking about,
Yeah,
and then all of the subsequent partnerships too that are coming out. Definitely a lot of exciting stuff
it's been
there. Yeah.
crazy.
Um,
Super proud of that team. Like, years in the making. I remember first reading the Celestia, like, well, the
Lazy
Lazy Ledger
Ledger,
white
that's
paper
right.
years back, and I had no understanding of what was
Yeah, me
going on.
too.
Like 2020 me or whenever that was not ready for
Yeah, I
that.
remember seeing, like, I think it was, like, Altcoin Psycho or someone, like, talking about how it was just, like, alpha hidden in plain sight, and I went and read it, and I like, this was when I thought, like, UST would be, like, the future of stablecoins. Like, I read that
Me
thing and
too.
I was like, "Wow, this is so cool." I had no idea what I was talking about. But I was right in the end, I
Yeah.
guess, even though I didn't know. Um,
You were right about one of the two things you mentioned there. Unfortunately, we were both wrong in the other thing that you named, which is UST
Horrendously
becoming the
wrong
money of the
too. Like,
world.
not even, like, a little
Yeah.
bit wrong, but embarrassingly wrong. But,
I could say in hindsight, hilariously wrong is how I'd frame it. It was a bet worth taking, I think, but obviously I was blind to a few pretty obvious things in
yeah,
hindsight.
it's the cost of doing business here, I think. I definitely wouldn't trade it.
Exactly.
Learned a lot of valuable lessons throughout that. Um,
Agreed. Me too.
before we dive, like, too deep into ecosystem, or I guess, like, more so, because we wanna talk about spend a little bit of time talking about Cosmos. Before we talk about what's there, I'm curious as to, like, I mean, you mentioned that you kind of owe a lot of where you're at now due to the early stages of being in Cosmos and writing about it. What specifically from, like, an infrastructural perspective do you think makes Cosmos exciting? Or what makes it more differentiated to you compared to looking at, a traditional, like, monolithic L1?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different angles you can look at. The first, just like the tech angle itself, which is Cosmos was the first to actually offer developers, like application developers specifically, the opportunity to like customize the blockchain that their application is built on top of. An easy example is like if you're Uniswap on Ethereum, you can't really, I mean, you could try to politic your way into doing this, but it's very difficult to actually alter the Ethereum core protocol in a way that benefits Uniswap because again, there's a lot of other applications built on Ethereum that have differing views and different users who have different views. So it's a very challenging landscape to actually go about and like pass the EIP to like advantageously position your protocol. So what Cosmos enables again to like use Osmosis as a comparison, like Osmosis controls the stack that they're built on from top to bottom. There's validators that support it that obviously have governance power, but if Osmosis wants to pass something to basically further enhance the osmosis core application like the AMM, they're largely able to do that. And so far they've done that with like work with Skip on capturing MEV in an in protocol way and giving value to stakers and just doing things that an application building on a monolithic blockchain just cannot do. And it's been pretty exciting, I think, to see how that's all evolved on Cosmos over the last few years. Like we've seen a number of teams come to Cosmos because they want to basically embrace that customizability aspect that you can't get on a monolithic L1. And I think like, with app rollups as well, there's interesting design space for that. And then the last thing I want to mention is like, you know, I think I undervalue this for a point in time, but I think it really matters is like cultural and like actually ideological sovereignty. When you are building an application on Ethereum, you're a part of Ethereum. Like you're generally bought into that ethos, you're part of that ecosystem and community. When you build an app chain, you are the ethos, you are the community, and you can design the culture around like your own ideals, the community's ideals, all of these things. And so I'm a big believer in sovereignty. I think like people naturally seek it, especially at a certain scale. And Cosmos's tech stack allows that to happen. And I think like we'd all be kind of blind to not say that cultural identification doesn't have a role in crypto. It very much does, in my opinion. And Cosmos like uniquely allows people to kind of embrace that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I, I like what you said about kind of the adjustment that Cosmos app chains can make that Ethereum dApps really can't make that's in their favor. I really was excited to have you on just because I feel like I have a high level understanding of the Cosmos ecosystem, but I think what entices me about crypto is getting into the weeds on what the core believers are arguing about within each ecosystem. I feel like I have a good grasp on the, arguments within the ETH ecosystem, risks with EigenLayer, different ERCs, whatever it may be. Uh, what are people talking about in the Cosmos ecosystem? What are the improvements that one group wants to make versus another? Because I've heard like high level that there's been like big blockers in different at different stages with like what was supposed to be Atom 2.0 and all these other things. Is there any like ounce of value in them, or some understanding that maybe general, you know, crypto people are not understanding or not
Yeah,
seeing?
so Cosmos is really, really complicated, and the ecosystem, I'll include myself in it. We fight like family. Like people really care about it, and there's some pretty nasty battles that tend to happen. It seems like every year at least. I think the first thing that's like important to address is like there's no real definition of what Cosmos is, because some people might say it's the Cosmos Hub and the things built around it because that was like the first blockchain to be deployed on Cosmos, and now there's ICS in these things. But obviously, there's an underlying tech stack, the Cosmos SDK, which like a lot of different protocols are built on top of. Like DYDX now is, Celestia is, say, many others. And like whether they're a part of Cosmos is a point of contention in itself. You might talk to different members of their teams and they're going to give different answers. But to zoom in on the Cosmos Hub, that's generally where most of the contention exists. I'd say the biggest argument that's persisted over my time in Cosmos has been whether or not the Cosmos Hub should have smart contracts. So right now and to date, the Cosmos Hub has not had smart contracts. It basically right now acts as like a security protocol where different chains via ICS can leverage staked Atom for security. And so Neutron exists in that way. Strat exists in that way, as a few others as well. And there's a lot of contention around ICS and whether or not that should exist. And so like it really, in my opinion, like largely boils down to the Cosmos Hub. Atom 2.0 is another example of a highly contentious debate that didn't end up getting passed, that surrounded the Cosmos Hub and its future. To boil it down, it was kind of like, okay, we have this token with quite a bit of value, but not a lot of utility. And so the people that were, supporting Atom 2.0 basically were thinking of ways to actually bring value to Atom as a token. Again, it wasn't shot down, but one of its components was ICS. And so that has been built out. Other components of it are kind of in the works, mostly actually built by like third-party teams, not really directly associated with Cosmos Hub. But yeah, Cosmos governance can be a mess. I'll say that. And like, there's a good history there to look
And,
into.
is when you say ICS, you're mentioning interchain
Yeah.
security,
Yeah,
I'm
definitely
assuming.
please throughout this
Okay.
correct me if or like stop me if I'm like going too in depth without explaining the high levels. So ICS is a shared security mechanism that is supported by the Cosmos Hub that basically consumer chains that they're called are able to leverage the security staked on the Cosmos Hub by Atom stakers to secure their own protocol. And so most Cosmos chains to date, because ICS hasn't existed for that long, have their own validator set and therefore their own security propositions. For Stargaze, for example, where bad kids exist, is secured by star staking. And so stakers who want to support Stargaze stake their stars tokens. And kind of like due to the fragmentation that kind of creates naturally when you have potentially 1,000 chains with their own security propositions, the idea was to basically centralize security around the Cosmos Hub, which is the most liquid and most valuable token today in Cosmos. Um, well, depends on how you define Cosmos. I think Celestia is ahead of it at this point. And so, the idea was to basically build an ecosystem which all leverages the Cosmos Hub security without actually having to require smart contracts on the Cosmos Hub.
Interesting. And so, can you explain like the journey that some of these like consumer chains go through for setting up that validator set? Is the meta just airdrop to Atom stakers and just hope your token has a market cap valuable enough for people to kind of like value
So
securing it?
this answer probably won't age well because ICS is like being reworked. I think like an ICS 2.0 is like on the horizon, and so that's one thing to be cognizant of and look out for. Right now, how it works is basically it's up to each consumer chain to like go out to governance and submit a proposal, which basically outlines why they should be a consumer chain and receive security from the Cosmos Hub. There's no one size fits all model. Like what Neutron proposed versus what Stripe proposed, vastly different. Um, Definitely it's in your best interest to appeal to token holders because they ultimately have the vote to say yes or no. Another kind of factor in this is validators who also have a governance vote. And so the one big critique of ICS to date, and again, maybe I'm biased because of like my experience and like time spent with Figment, is validators are kind of getting the short end of the stick right now. they're not being paid out in the same way that token holders are. And the reason for that is because validators are actually running the infrastructure and paying the cost to actually do that, where token holders do not do that. You just stake with a validator, you get staking rewards, and you're a happy person. And so I think where ICS 2.0 and like the new work and thought being put into it is like, okay, we have this like trilemma like almost where you have like Atom holders, Atom validators, and consumer chains. How do we satisfy all three? Crypto loves trilemmas, TBD. There's definitely a lot of interesting, discussion going on in the forums right now. We don't need to get in too much detail into that, but I would recommend reading all of that discussion because it's really insightful.
Okay, and just last bit on the security aspect, because I think the whole eigenlayer ecosystem is pretty interesting, and there's conversation on how I'm going to butcher this explanation, but how their AVS systems can kind of be the security solution instead of going the airdrop for validators. Could you maybe touch on the differences and maybe like what might why one is worse versus the other?
So, from a function standpoint, there's one big difference in how AVSs work versus how ICS today works. And I think this will actually change to function more like AVSs. But basically, right now, every single validator on the Cosmos Hub is required to support a consumer chain. Where for AVSs, if you're an Ethereum validator, you don't have to support every single AVS that launches. Um, you know, one of the reasons why like LRTs exist is like this can like actually help like figure out for validators which AVSs they'll support versus which they wouldn't. There's an ever evolving design space around that. But yeah, in terms of like the functionality and application of it, it's largely similar. The big difference is like Eigenlayer is kind of more like Avalanche with subnets, where like you don't need every single validator to actually support every single subnet. You just need a select amount that basically are like, okay, we want to do this. We like this proposition. But I do think ICS will evolve to have like more of a subnet style approach. One interesting thing to note is that Eigenlayer is actually going to be coming to Cosmos, whether it's through Ethos or teams building out their own AVSs. Like, there's no reason why it can't happen, and it's one of the things that I'm most excited about. I've actually like been tweeting about this for like a while now, and it's actually happening, which is awesome. Because I think like for Cosmos, like why not bridge this gap? Like there's really no reason not to, besides like maybe some tribalist elements. But it's a pretty exciting thing to kind of see these two ecosystems fully merge together and become kind of like one big happy family.
Wait, so if you can bootstrap security with Eigenlayer on Cosmos chains, what does Cosmos do? Like, why do we still need like ICS?
That's a big question you're asking there. I mean, again, that's when you can argue that the Cosmos is not necessarily a function of the Cosmos Hub. It could be something bigger like the Cosmos SDK, which like is very much alive and well if you're looking at everything happening between. Obviously, you guys talked to Smokey last week. Like he's building on Cosmos, Anisha is building on Cosmos. A bunch of great teams are, and so yeah, it's hard to say how this impacts the Cosmos Hub. I mean, the Cosmos Hub could use Eigenlayer. It just really is going to be interesting. I'm not here to really take a stance on like what's going to happen, but I do think economic security is going to be one of the really interesting things to watch throughout the, you know, persistence of this bull cycle that we're in.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a question I am not remotely qualified to unpack. So we're just gonna move on from that one. Um, let's talk
Neither am I.
let's talk ecosystem a little bit. I maybe this is like the wrong understanding, but I feel like when I hear people say Cosmos ecosystem, I find that to be like a bit of a misnomer. Like they're not really any more connected than uh an app on Solana. Well, an app on one L2 and an app on another L2. I don't really consider Cosmos apps to be part of this like ecosystem necessarily. Would you say that makes sense, or do you still consider, because you said yourself, if you are running an app chain on Cosmos, you have the I guess the privilege and the burden of being able to create your own culture and community and ethos. But by the same token, you also can't exactly leverage that of what's around you as easily. Is that the
Yeah.
case when it comes to building on the Cosmos?
So it is in terms of like how closely you want to associate yourself with Cosmos. Like again, like if you're deploying an application on Solana, you better want to be a part of Solana, or else like what are
Yeah.
you doing? Whereas in Cosmos, you kind of have the optionality to be like, all right, I'm gonna be fully bought in or not bought in at all, or somewhere in the middle. The one big difference between like two L2s versus like two Cosmos app chains is Cosmos has like an enshrined interoperability protocol called IBC. It comes out of the box with the Cosmos SDK. Essentially, it's like a light client based bridging mechanism that connects Cosmos chains. And the TLDR of how it functions is essentially like instead of like actually having trust placed on the bridge, like so for Axelar, Wormhole, etc., you are depending on security and the trustfulness of the consensus for each of those things. Whereas for IBC, basically it's just verifying that chain A and chain B have reached consensus. And if that is the case, then you can go ahead and bridge. So there's no trust placed on the bridge in between them. IBC is actually like likely going to be ported over to Ethereum and rollups as well. I know Union, Polymer, I think a few other teams are working on that as well. So that'll happen. At which point, what is Cosmos? I have, part of my French, no fucking idea. But I think like right now the big difference I would say is like having an enshrined introp protocol connecting them. Where for L2s, there's nothing like that exists today. Like there's a plethora of options, or you can just go through the L1, which takes forever. But I guess that would be the enshrined way to do that.
It's interesting. You have to like ask questions. If you're a Cosmos builder, I feel like you have to ask questions that don't exist elsewhere. Like stuff that you would never think would matter on a normal or our definition of what a normal chain is. And like
Yeah.
definitions are like flimsy almost. It feels like it's tough to like really like what is the cosmos really, you know? Like I don't
It was way easier to define a few years ago. And then now that Cosmos is actually like done well, it's just become way more confusing because the bigger it grows, the harder it gets to define pretty
I'm
much.
sure. I'm sure. I think for me, what really helped me like understand, at least from someone who's more on the I guess like app building side, someone who's more interested in stuff like DeFi and consumer applications, I think the DYDX change was something that really helped sell kind of why someone would go build on Cosmos. And it's not like they did it because they wanted to be a Cosmos chain, because they wanted to buy
Yeah.
into that philosophy in the way that like Unibot going to Solana wanted to get some of that hype. It has nothing to do with that. It's more so just they wanted the sovereignty to create infrastructure that they can't create elsewhere, that they where they can't alter the rules of other chains. So let's just make our own. Um,
Yeah.
that to me made a lot of sense, and it was the first use case I understood where like of something that is only possible in the cosmos. What are some other examples you've seen of apps that exist there that can't exist elsewhere?
It's a great question. You know, so far, Celestia is the only modular DA layer that exists. Mind you, Eigen is building their own solution. Avail is going to exist. There's a few others as well. Um, but Celestia has benefited, I think, in its time to market by using a stack that's already been battle tested. They're using Tendermint consensus. They're using the Cosmos SDK. All of these things that have been kind of tested throughout the years of Cosmos existing. Um, and it also like kind of shows like some strengths, I think, in terms of like its access to Cosmos. Like osmosis has been very key in Celestia's kind of like early growth, and so that having that accessibility, I think, has been very valuable for them. And I think beyond that, another example I started kind of talking about it was osmosis. Like osmosis, in my opinion, is one of the most advanced AMMs that exists because they've been able to do things at the protocol layer before anyone else even really thought to. And mind you, they do miss out maybe on some network effects. Like you're not on Solana, you're not on Ethereum. Like you're kind of bringing liquidity to osmosis specifically. But the stuff we've done with MEV, the stuff they've been able to do with different like, other things, the governance as well, is just like I think very innovative, and it's just going to keep going further. Um, I think besides that, I mean, look at Berachain. Like Berachain's been able to do some super interesting things with consensus, with proof of liquidity that has never existed before. And then you have like teams like Initia and Dimension that are serving as like a L1 settlement layer for different rollups and enabling all sorts of composability benefits that really no one else has been able to derive yet. And so I think like, to summarize this answer, I think what I've always kind of seen Cosmos as is like the testing grounds for a lot of other kind of ecosystems to look at and follow, or choose not to follow if something goes wrong. I do think in many ways Ethereum's roadmap has evolved to match Cosmos. Cosmos had app chains before Ethereum even had rollups, and now you're seeing app rollups exist on Ethereum, like Avo. And so it's all kind of going in the same direction, and it also makes sense now that we're seeing Ethereum and Cosmos really merge together. Like in 5 years, are we going to know what's Ethereum and what's Cosmos? Maybe not. It's hard to say. Right now in crypto's nascency, it makes sense to have this like kind of divide and have these different cultures and ecosystems. But I do think over time it's going to be a lot more blurred lines, and probably Cosmos will be a big part of crypto without really anyone even knowing it.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that's the thesis for a lot of teams building on there, right? Is people don't need to know what chain we're on necessarily; they just need a good application. I The idea of Cosmos being like a sandbox or like a place to test things out is, as an outsider, one that really resonates, and I think that, and maybe your thesis is different for this. I don't exactly know like what the what the core of the community thinks, but to me that really like exemplifies kind of the bad kids like builder thesis. And I'm wondering like kind of what uh can you tell, like, I feel like not enough people know about that sort of culture or like what it is really. Can you talk a little bit about that, cuz I know you've been I mean, as long as I've known you, you've been a bad kid.
Yeah, bad kids are an interesting one. I think like a lot of us just silently bought into it and we're like, these are freaking awesome. Like, let's do this. It's kind of like, yeah, the rebellious nature of Cosmos. I think like the obvious thing to do if you're a smart contract developer, like really anyone who's interested in building on chain for a while, was just to go on Ethereum. Obviously, Solana, others came to exist, but like Cosmos was one of the first ecosystems to really exist besides Ethereum in terms of like smart contract environments. And so I think it was a rebellious choice to go to Cosmos to kind of like believe in the multi-chain app chain thesis, because for a while no one believed in that really besides like Cosmos and then Polkadot. And so yeah, kind of like throughout its history, I think maybe without even realizing it, a lot of us kind of by supporting Cosmos viewed ourselves as like the bad kids of crypto, and not listening to people who kind of said like, no, this is the right design, Cosmos is the wrong design. And there's been a lot of times I think where people doubted whether or not Cosmos would make it. Like besides until recently, the last year was pretty tough for Cosmos. Like I think a lot of people were asking pretty existential questions about it. I was on a few panels and people were like, Cosmos has 6 months to live. What do you do? And it's like, oh damn. And like those 6 months are already up. So like I think we've survived it. But like I think again, it's like being determined to like let this tech stack thrive, let the ecosystem thrive. All summarizes bad kids, basically. Like whoever drew that up, amazing job, because they're freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Was it really like an 11-year-old or
I actually have
whatever it
no
was?
idea. That's why I said whoever. Like, there's rumors out there. I don't think it's an 11-year-old, but it certainly could be. If so, that 11-year-old did a lot cooler things at that age than I did. Um, Someone out there probably knows, but I actually do not know who the bad kid creator
That would
is.
be kind of messed up. Somebody sat their kid down and was like, "Draw 10,000 different like characters for me." That would be
Maybe the kid was just doodling in like his or her school book, anyways, his journal, and then is like the parent was like, "Oh, these are awesome. I love Cosmos. Let's put this on Stargaze." And then
the
the
rest
rest
is
happened. I
history.
don't know. We can all
Yeah.
speculate.
I think bad kids have been like my only like Cosmos exposure, I guess, if you can call it that. I guess there really is nothing else. I mean, nothing else that is like wholly Cosmos besides like Atom, which nobody cares about that, let's be honest. And like maybe Osmosis, but
Yeah.
that's like more DeFi centered and like also, not ideal.
Has again, I'm like kind of like unaware of this because I've just been in Cosmos for a while. Is Bad Kids one of those things? Is like a cultural artifact of Cosmos? Like even outside of Cosmos, everyone is like, "That's Cosmos." Have we hit that point?
I don't know. I think
Okay.
I think we're lucky because I don't remember why, but I bought two, like maybe 2.5, 2 years ago, something like that. when they were like 400, I think like a couple $100.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm
Smart
just
man.
gonna. I think I was just listening to someone smarter than me, and I was like, I'm just gonna let this be like my Cosmos thing. I don't need anything else. Maybe I'll stake some Atom for airdrops, but that's it. And now that they're like getting attention via airdrops and via like a smooth
It's
10x
crazy.
in price, I think now people are more aware. The people who have been
Yeah.
around for a while, and I think everybody sort of had somewhat of a Cosmos. Not everybody, but a lot of people who've been around long enough had somewhat of a Cosmos phase. If you're like me, you were probably turned off to
Yeah.
it from just the user experience, from going over there and
Yeah.
just having to deal with that. Um, what's happening there? Is there a lot of concentrated effort to address like the issues with UX?
Yeah, I would say so. Again, this is hard because the big issue that Cosmos has run into is like when issues cross over into other app chains, and now like you're treading on people's land almost. It's like, okay, who really controls like the stack that connects everything? Cosmos is different than like Solana, Ethereum, and other L1s and ecosystems that have a foundation that's like basically responsible for looking after the health of like the protocol and ecosystem. Cosmos has like no centralized foundation. It has a bunch of different orgs that exist and try to all help Cosmos, but like it tends to be a complicated matter to get really anything done that helps everyone out in Cosmos. And yeah, I think Kepler has been doing a lot of work to try to like revamp Kepler wallet. For those unfamiliar, Kepler is like in many ways the MetaMask of Cosmos. Like it's the go-to wallet for most Cosmos users. Actually, MetaMask has recently been brought over to Cosmos via MetaMask Snaps. So like people can actually use MetaMask now, which is a great unlock. And yeah, I think like Skip has done interesting work with IBC Fun, which like basically tries to abstract like the complexity of using IBC to like transact between different chains. Where like you go to this one dashboard, you say I want to swap Osmo for Kujira, and then it gives you basically it's like Jupiter but for cross-chain IBC stuff. It's like this is the best um, route based on the optimizations you want, and then it executes that transaction for you. So I do think we're seeing a good amount of abstraction from like the multi-chain kind of element of Cosmos, but we still have a ways to go. Like today, I was trying to play around on a DevNet, and I literally couldn't find it in my Cosmos wallet because I would like go to the faucet and it's like, "What's your address?" And I'm like, "I have no idea what my address is," and so we still have work to do. Mind you, it's the DevNet, so like that's about the earliest of stages you can go. But I do think like that's the big thing that crypto as a whole has to solve for. Like if Ethereum's going to move towards L2s and app chains, like they're going to run into all the same UX issues. And that's why like, I think a lot of people still support Solana because like Solana is super easy to use, it's cheap to use, everything's accessible, so you don't run into the complexity of having to manage multiple chains, multiple potential wallets, and everything in between.
Yeah, the fragmentation issue is like a shared one across a bunch of
Yeah.
ecosystems now. Ethereum, Cosmos. Is you mentioned how Cosmos is like more of a sandbox to try things, and some of the things that Osmosis tried. I've sort of liked that team for a while. I've listened to some of their interviews, um, but I haven't kept up with what they're doing. Have there been any kind of new breakthroughs in solving some of the liquidity fragmentation across DeFi?
So within Osmosis, so they months ago now, I think, um, developed and released concentrated liquidity. So that's like a great way to kind of like make liquidity that exists in Osmosis just more efficient. Because especially in the bear market, like post Terra, there was a lack of liquidity that made transacting quite prohibitive. Um, for Cosmos more broadly, again, I think it's more abstraction rather than like unifying liquidity. It's hard because like chains want to have their own dexes and own their own liquidity, but at the same time, for users, it becomes very challenging to actually use that type of structure. And so that is where IBC Fun is valuable because it does, again, be able to route into different pools and different chains. But I think like, what Say thinks it's best for its own liquidity, what DYDX thinks what's best for its own liquidity, and what Osmosis thinks what's best for its own liquidity are always going to be butting heads to a degree. Like as a chain, especially a DeFi focused chain, kind of like your moat is liquidity in many ways. And so like you're not really naturally incentivized to share that with everyone else. Like naturally it does happen like across exists obviously outside of Cosmos. And so I think we're going to see things get better. But yeah, so that was a long non-answer, I'd say. Like I feel like stuff is happening, but at the same time, it's like not openly embraced necessarily, just like given the stuff that people care about.
Yeah. I think we've kind of went pretty deep into the Cosmos ecosystem. I'm sure you're exploring more than just the Cosmos ecosystem. Anything else outside of that that you're interested in these days?
Yeah. So I've been playing around a lot on Sui. I'd say the last like 6 or so weeks, maybe 2 months now. Um, just I like trying net new blockchains, like things that like Sui's obviously new with Move. It has this like novel consensus mechanisms, all these different things, and so I was like playing around with things and kind of trying to break them, see what works. I was saying earlier, like the one thing I think I've underexplored is rollups on Ethereum. Like I've used kind of the basics, but I'm definitely not like super in the weeds yet there. So I still have a lot to learn in that capacity. But honestly, like I'm someone who like uses blockchains because I enjoy using them. It's just like way that I learn. I learn by making mistakes and figuring out ways to fix those mistakes and identifying problems that hopefully translate to good outcomes and kind of like my job. And yeah, I mean, like everyone else, I've been on Solana quite a bit. Love Solana. I really just like everything. So yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else. What do you guys use the most?
Um,
It's a
I
good
don't,
question.
It's a hard
I
answer,
don't,
right?
I think surprisingly enough, like when I think about the last like 6 months, I don't really think I use rollups either. Genuinely, I farm the shit out of
Wow.
those things, but I, I don't really like. I mean, in some cases, if a token exists on Ethereum that I want to hold and it's also available on an L2 with decent liquidity, I'll buy it on the L2 every time just because of gas.
Yeah.
Besides that, like I don't really do too much on L2s. I do quite a bit on Solana these days, and quite a bit on
Yeah.
mainnet, but I don't know. I'm not too active in the roll up game anymore, which I didn't even realize until like you brought it up. I was like, damn, like really, that's kind of surprising. I feel like everyone's on L2s, and then I realized like I'm not even.
I assumed you were deep in
I
L2s, to
I
be honest.
definitely
It
have
just made
been.
sense.
Like the thing is not enough interesting stuff has been going on there for me to pay attention. There's a lot of really cool teams building, and I think they
Yeah.
are building stuff that will bring me there, but stuff takes time. Right now is like a
It's a lot of infrastructure, not enough like cool apps. I think it's the L2 problem
Yeah.
right now. Like I don't even remember the last
yeah.
transaction I did on Arbitrum. It might have been like DMT, but I've messed around with Base. Um, but yeah, Solana has been fun, and I
Yeah, Solana's been great.
yeah was late to the Solana game.
I do think like I mean I've thoroughly enjoyed using both Hyperliquid and
Mhm.
Avo. Um, Unfortunately, I'm not the best perps trader, and so I try to avoid kind of them right now because it's just like a habit I'm trying to break. But like I think both applications are brilliantly designed and kind of like embrace like why L2s are a valid solution for a lot of things. And so
Hyperliquid's a Cosmos chain,
yeah,
Dougie.
is it on Arbitrum?
Its onboarding is on Arbitrum, but Hyperliquid itself is a Cosmos chain.
Are you serious?
I'm pretty sure.
Is it
Yeah.
really?
I think
Wow,
I think they have plans to migrate to being an app specific L2. But as far as I remember, they
interesting.
have been. I mean, it say what like the argument against like these perp dexes on app specific chains not named DYDX is that you're dealing with a front end for a Microsoft Excel sheet, basically. But yeah, no, I'm pretty sure Hyperliquid is a Cosmos chain, and they have like rough plans to move to their own like EVM compatible. I don't know whether it's Arbitrum or what, but their own EVM compatible
Wow.
L2.
To my friends on Hyperliquid, I apologize. I thought you were just an application on Arbitrum, a great application, but I didn't realize that. Damn,
Definitely, yeah.
learn
It's
something new
it's
every
very
day.
surprising. I remember onboarding there first, and I was Like I didn't really believe it at first. I was like, this is like I'm just using Arbitrum, right? Like that's what it feels like.
That's kind of proving the thesis of like you're going to use Cosmos without even knowing
Yeah.
it. Like here I
Yeah.
am. I think I'm pretty deep in the space, and I didn't even know until
Yeah.
now. I've been using it for like a long time.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
They have a great thing going, definitely. I'm a big fan of theirs. I have a I have kind of a big question to ask, or like a hard question, I guess.
Oh boy.
I based off of like what I know about you and Figment and like the things I see you talking about, um, I would describe you and like your organization as people who builders who are trying to improve block space, basically trying to make it more scalable, composable, anti-fragile, just trying to perfect it really. Um, but obviously the use cases for that block space or the demand for it is still kind of weird. Like let's say we have it like nailed down tomorrow, right? Like let's say somehow uh everything just ships. Everything that is supposed to happen over the next 50 years just ships in terms of infrastructure and we're there. What now? Like what do we use this block space for?
It's a great question. Also, the way you described this was fantastic. I'm gonna have to use that for like, I'm gonna have to pitch myself because that was like succinctly and just well put. Um, okay, so I mean, I'm biased here because like I think a lot about like economics and finance, and that's what brought me into crypto. It's what kind of like my thinking space evolves around. Like I do think blockchain's like core value prop is like enabling fast exchange between humans, and a lot of that naturally does lead to financial kind of purposes for that application. I think the fact that like if either of you guys are in, I don't know, Thailand and I'm here, I can send you money or transact with you instantly at a very low cost. And obviously I think you need to make the user experience better, but I can pretty safely know that it's you without having to like go through these weird kind of like backdoor ways to do that. And so I think like what we've seen crypto do extremely well, it's a very high velocity economy and media, like value exchange arena, you can call it. And like that's why we see these like extremely volatile periods because things happen quicker on chain than anywhere else. And like when you kind of unpack that, I do think there's real financial long lasting use cases that can exist. Again, whether it's cross border payments, whether it's like people who need loans and want to access like a, you know, stable coin driven loan and don't have to worry about this currency risk and all of these things. And you can get immediate liquidity. You don't have to worry about, you know, driving all the way to a bank that may or may not be open to actually get your money back or pay with, you know, whatever. And so all of those things are what got me into the space. I still believe like they have legitimate legs to them. But you know, again, going on like kind of the medium of exchange thesis, like I do think games are an interesting thing as well because like games are very isolated right now by nature. And like if you think of a world where games are composable and users of one game are able to interact with user another game, like it is interesting. Again, like limitations need to exist. I don't think a user playing a Civil War game wants to all of a sudden be like in Halo world. That would make no sense. But like the design space becomes very interesting. And so I do think like understanding the benefits of blockchain, fixing some of like the rugged edges right now, and then applying that, we have a lot of the use cases. Just a matter of like reaching a scale where it makes sense for more people to interact. Because like compliance is one thing that does not exist, and like if you want RWAs to like happen at scale, things need to change along those lines. User experience is a major inhibitor. Most people's first interaction on chain is a very bad one. You either pay $100 in Ethereum or you send it to the wrong address, you lose your money, you do something you can't recover. And so we need to build like kind of guardrails around that, or at least like have environments that are safe, environments that are just like free for all, and understand the differences between them. So I think it comes down to like education, um, smoothing out the UX, and just like fixing some of these issues that haven't been addressed yet. But the applications, in my opinion, actually aren't bad. They just aren't at
I think that's a
scale.
hot
And so we
take.
have a ways to go
I
towards
feel like
that.
most people wouldn't agree with that.
I think everyone, you know, I love using blockchain. So maybe I'm biased again here. Where like for me, DeFi is like, I mean, obviously it is like investing, so people shouldn't treat it like this, but it is
Mhm.
fun. Like I do like love using it and like talking to my friends in my group chats about these different things. Like the act of being a DeFi participant to me is very engaging. And I think like that's a demonstration of a good application. Like for a lot of people, Instagram is a lot of fun. And so like if you enjoy the applications you're engaging with, mind you, like we all are very niche. Like we don't represent the greater population by any means, but I do think if you make things more accessible and easier to use, more people would find the same thing. And not everyone wants to be trading, shit coins, but if you can, take out a loan from your computer that is not controlled by, people you don't want it to be controlled by, then like that's a huge unlock. So I don't know, maybe I'm one of the few to believe crypto's in a pretty healthy state. It's just a matter of reaching scale. But there are definitely other applications that I would love to see exist that aren't just like entirely financially rooted.
Yeah, it's a good point. Actually, it's interesting to think about like how things would be different if we were scalable and regulated and usable to an extent. The UX is just like still killer in a lot of different ways. I remember like not long ago, Cedo was like offboarding to some exchange from Arbitrum, and he accidentally sent USDC, like what was it, like bridged USDC instead of regular
Yeah.
USDC, and it was like a week or two
Yep.
after they did the migration. Like that is just so
Yeah.
dumb, dude. That's like such an unnecessary problem.
I had to wait close to like a month and a
That's
half
ridiculous. And that's one
to get
like
that out.
niche
That
Yeah.
issue. Like
sucks.
that's so specific, dude.
Fuck crypto.com.
I mean, if we're being very honest here, I got scammed like 2 weeks ago. Again, this is where I should be smarter about when I use blockchain, but I was like at an airport. My flight was about to like take off, and I thought an airdrop had just been announced, and I lost all of my tokens that would have qualified me for
Oh
the
shit,
airdrop.
dude.
Again, it's survivable. It
Oof.
wasn't, it is what it is. It's an expensive lesson to learn, but like that shit just can't
Yeah.
happen. Like again, we've all been using crypto for a long time, and like Cedo sending the wrong token format to an exchange and like takes 2 weeks to get it back. I sent my money to God knows who, and we're still making these mistakes. So, like for the average person who like either doesn't have like the financial base or just lacks the experience, like you make that mistake once and you're done forever. Like you're never coming back, and like we need to fix
Yeah.
that.
You definitely, I think we've all like got the hair on our chest at this point to like make mistakes like that and like learn from it. But like, most newcomers making something even half the severity of either of those things are going to be turned off like from day one, pretty much. Like that kind of stuff
Exactly.
just can't happen. Shifting back towards like Figment Capital or a little bit, or I guess not Figment Capital specifically, but your time as an investor. What are some deals you guys have done that you can talk about, obviously, in the past like year or so that you're excited for? And what are some that you've seen that you have not been able to get on, but you wish you could have? Either you missed it or for whatever reason you didn't make it on.
So this is where I have to do the disclaimer that none of this is financial
Sure.
advice,
The
or
whole
else my
episode. That
CFO would
applies for
kill
the
me.
whole
The
episode.
whole
Yeah.
episode, yeah, goes without saying, but this part
Yeah.
especially, or else my CFO will come through this door and tackle me very quickly. Um, so yeah, I guess like publicly, we invested recently in Renzo, which
Oh.
I think is extremely exciting. So Eigenlayer, we're a seed investor in Eigenlayer, so obviously like our fund, myself included, like has very high hopes for that ecosystem and what it's going to evolve to be. But I do think LRTs really have to exist. Like on one note, like people want LSTs because they want liquidity for staked assets. It's only natural that you want that, and you can use it in DeFi. Exactly same goes for Eigenlayer. But uniquely, what Renzo offers, which LSTs don't, is access to like an index basically of different AVSs. So LSTs for Ethereum, for example, staked ETH is just ETH. But for Renzo versus EtherFi and other LRTs, like they could be entirely different compositions. And so now it's almost, I can't say this on a podcast. I'll just say it. It's kind of like an ETF where like, you're able to access like all sorts of different, weights and balances of different positions, and like you're like, oh, I like this one, like this has these AVSs that I want to have exposure to, so I'll buy this one. I'm like, oh, that one doesn't have that, so I'll avoid that one. So I think from a user standpoint, that's super interesting. The last thing that's also really interesting, and like I've been able to uniquely observe this, is validators have an issue where they're not really able to select which AVSs they want to support, because by doing that, you're making decisions on behalf of your stakers, which makes you more like a asset manager rather than an actual technology provider. And so what LRTs do is basically they work with different operators to and they inform them, okay, our governance decided that we're going to support these AVSs, so you guys go out and do this, and everyone's happy. So it's a way to kind of circumvent that potential compliance issue that otherwise Eigenlayer spawns. So yeah, love Renzo. They've been crushing it. I also have lots of respect for EtherFi, Kelp. I know both those teams and think they're great. So nothing against them. Another investment, I would say, this is going back to Cosmos, so it's relevant. We I don't know if it's not announced yet.
If you don't
I don't know
have
if I
to,
can
you don't
share
have.
it.
We're not pushing or anything here. Do whatever you feel comfortable doing.
No,
Yeah,
no, no, it's
yeah.
good. Yeah, I'll skip that one. But things that I missed, to go to that, I think Barachain, I kick myself over every single day. Those guys are incredible, like incredibly, incredibly smart people. Unfortunately, I didn't speak to them until their round about a year ago, where the market was just not in a good spot, and they were raising at a valuation that was now looks really good. And so unfortunately just never pulled the trigger on that one, but absolutely love those guys. I'm already trying to use Barachain. I sadly have not been able to get my tokens from the faucet yet, but hopefully one day I will. And then like I just love those guys and what they do and everything they stand for. Um, yeah, besides that, I think the AI space is really interesting. And this is more of like a stance of our fund where it's like we do have, interest in it. We have dipped our toe into AI, but like we try to stick to what our expertise is. And like as someone who has a brain beyond crypto, I think AI is obviously a massive, massive space that's going to change the world. And it makes sense how it can be applied on chains. Like there's things that have to exist, I think, that only blockchain can offer for AI to be safe. I think one example, is a small example, is like verifying the validity of something. I'm a big Drake fan. I've been listening to Drake since I was like, I don't know, 10 years old. And I heard an AI generated
Hmm.
Drake song a year ago. And I thought it was a new Drake song. I didn't see the title and I was like, oh, this song is amazing. When did Drake put this out? And then I saw the title, it was AI generated. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm going to fall for this shit all the time. And so with blockchain, you can actually verify that this is an original work. It was published at this time, and anything derivative, you can easily point to that and prove that it's a derivative like work of something. And so applying that to a much larger scale, I think crypto and AI have a very interesting intersection that, not yet, I don't think we fully embraced as a fund, but definitely as like a person who researches and is interested in the space more broadly. I think it's a really exciting thing.
Yeah, AI is definitely a big one that I
It's a good
also
one.
wish I caught on to a little bit earlier. We're coming up on time. I wish we had more time to talk about
Oh,
Eigenlayer because I definitely had a lot of questions about that, but I wanted to cover the Cosmos stuff above all else. I guess like one, maybe this is like a far fetched question, but I don't remember who, but I saw a take on Twitter not long ago of someone saying that Eigenlayer is the biggest innovation to blockchain since smart contracts. Um,
hmm.
is there any part of you that agrees with that?
I think Eigenlayer can forever change Ethereum. Um, I do see a world where Ethereum, whether it's through rollups, Eigenlayer, or both, is basically just security chain where not a lot of stuff actually happens on the L1 itself, but rollups and chains using Eigenlayer tap into its security offering, and that gets around some of the scaling issues that Ethereum has and is consistently faced. And so, if you are someone who believes that the future is very Ethereum centric or involves Ethereum, then Eigenlayer plays an important role in that, in my opinion, without a doubt. I think what's important is like taking a safe and controlled approach to this, because if you kind of just open the floodgates and let people do whatever they want, there is a world where you can see some risks. I'm personally a believer in taking risks, so I love that Eigenlayer is existing. I think it's going to be a very good outcome for Ethereum. I think inevitably there's hiccups in the road for everything, but the long term view for me is a very good one. Um, I think it's a new concept, but it's not completely net new. So in terms of like the most unique and powerful thing to happen on chains and smart contracts, I don't know if I quite buy into that, because shared security has existed. I mean, Polkadot has been doing it for a while. Cosmos has been doing it. Others have been doing it. Eigenlayer is kind of like a new take on shared security and applying it to Ethereum. And so, is it amazing and like going to change Ethereum? Absolutely. But do I think it's like the most net new innovation to ever take place? Not necessarily. But it doesn't have to be. I don't think there's no reason to reinvent the wheel if like the wheel's already existing.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I guess I never thought about bootstrap security kind of existing already. But I think,
Just not the
yeah, not
scale.
at the
Like
scale.
Polkadot never reached this scale, and ICS is also far away from this
Yeah,
scale.
and certainly not leveraging something as robust as Ethereum security either. I mean, not to like rag on Polkadot or Cosmos, but it's definitely like a different game at that point. Um,
Yeah,
we
certainly is.
we gotta wrap up here, unfortunately. Cedo, do you have anything else? I know you have a hard stop here, so
No, I'm good. This was
cool,
awesome.
man.
I really
Yeah, thanks for
appreciate it.
having me, guys. I hope I didn't get too far in the weeds to a point where it's confusing, but really appreciate you guys having me. It was great to chat, and hopefully I can come back again at some
Yeah,
point.
for sure. We'll try and find some time maybe when we have some other interesting developments. I mean, I'm sure we could have you on again and have no shortage of things to talk about. But definitely we'll
You got plenty of other people as well, so I get it. When the time comes, it comes. But until then, no worries.
we'll make it happen, man, for sure. I appreciate you though, man. This was
Love it.
great. Thanks again.
Yeah, likewise, guys.